So we've just talked about what sort of qualities you should look for when you want to engage a lawyer,
Yes.
and how you select a lawyer. And now we're coming to the money side of things,
Yes.
which can be exorbitant. I mean, I know in my own case, I spent thousands and thousands of dollars.
I think it was hundreds of thousands.
Well, it was a huge amount of money. It could buy a house, actually. I don't want to think about it, but
expensive research and development for this current
well,
business.
exactly, that's right. Absolutely. There's always a positive and
silver lining.
Exactly.
Yes.
And yeah, totally. So, how can people save money when they are going through a divorce and separation, as it relates to the legal side of things?
Yeah, no, really good question. You can save a lot of money getting your information organised for your lawyer before you're going and seeing the lawyer. So let me explain some ways that you can do that. The first thing to do is a chronology. Okay, so this is your story. So what you want to have is on the left-hand column a date, and the right-hand column on a piece of paper or an Excel spreadsheet the event. So you're doing a chronology of your relationship, when you first started dating, when you moved in together or got married, and then sort of ending with separation date. Now, often a separation date can actually be quite controversial, and it may be relevant for how property is split, and indeed that can have a financial consequence, and we can do another video just to unpack that particular topic. But just to come back to our current topic about saving money, so a chronology of events of the relationship. So you're setting out when you got together, as I mentioned, perhaps when one party ceased working, often that is with the arrival of children, and then particularly where business is involved, is explaining, you know, when a business was started, how that was involved, acquisition of assets, so that's either personal assets like houses or shares in a business. So you're getting your sort of full story. Now, accompanying that is you want to have a folder of documents, so that can either be hard copy in an eSlate, or more typically these days people are organising that in some sort of share file, or Dropbox, or whatever. So in that you may have trust deeds, you may have shareholders agreements, you may have indeed bank statements, so a lot of financial information, you know, providing you've got, you know, lawful access to that. And if that material, if that documentation can then be cross-linked in some way to the chronology of events, so rather than sitting down with the lawyer, he or she there with pen and paper, laboriously writing it down, have all that organised, because that will save you a lot of money. In addition to that, what I want to know from clients is, at the end of all of this, what do you want? Okay, so I think most Kiwis will understand that in New Zealand it's pretty much a 50-50 split, but of course the rub is split of what? Because there's separate property and then there's relationship property, and it's only the relationship property that gets split. So what's useful is to have a list of all property, and then you may have received some inheritance from a maiden aunt. You know, that typically would be treated as separate property, or jewellery that's been given to you during the marriage, that's actually separate property. Although, a gift. Although you probably know that sometimes that is an area of controversy. So getting all that information down, available for your lawyer, and then saying, look, this is what I want. Now, it may be that the relationship property pool is $5 million, but to get to that, there may be $1 million that's controversial, and it might cost you a couple of $100,000 to argue over that.
Opportunity cost, isn't it?
Absolutely. So you might feel, you know, if I came out of this quickly with 1.75 million, even though it's not 50%, I don't want that aggravation, and I don't want to take the uncertainty with the legal fees.
And I tell a lot of clients that you've also got to realise that the emotional toll becomes, you know, worse and worse the longer that your case potentially drags on. You know, if you're in a scenario where you're actually not going to get much more out of it than you would now or in a year's time.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to spend $200,000 to get $300,000, so you're sort of netting $100,000, but it's going to take you 2 years to get there. Litigation is really a high risk form of investment, so you've got to ask yourself, okay, what's the value of my peace of mind getting it sorted now and not spending $200,000 on a risky investment? I'm probably doing myself out of some business here, Bridget. But what could you do with that $200,000? Could you go and start a new business and start generating an income and take a early settlement, which maybe in your mind you'll see as unfair. I'm sure the ex-partner will see it as unfair as well. So other ways of saving money, so we've talked about the start. I think what people need to understand is that lawyers typically charge on a 6-minute unit basis. So every time you ring up your lawyer and ask them a question, bang, it's like a
it's
it's like
not
a taxi.
50 cents either. They're going to be charged every 6 minutes, is it?
No. So I appreciate, you know, people starting down this journey. You know, for the first few months it's really uncertain and they will want to speak to their lawyer on a regular basis. I mean, we're all human, understand that. But I think when it gets perhaps to 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 months, I say to people, look, you do appreciate that every time you ring me and ask me this, you know, question, I'm having to charge you for that. So one way of saving some money is, rather than ringing, you know, 3 times over a week, is make a notebook, and when you've got sort of 4 or 5 questions, put that in an email, send that off to your lawyer, and so there's only sort of one interaction. So that's another way of saving some money. And of course, long term, my role as a lawyer and any reputable family lawyer, we all are charged with an ethical obligation of promoting settlement as opposed to promoting litigation. So the idea is to try and settle your case early, obviously not overly cheaply. You know, there is a tension there about, you know, settling early but then settling too cheaply.
Absolutely, and it's common that when both people have signed their settlement agreement, well, it's a good agreement if both parties actually come out slightly unhappy.
Yeah, and that's not just in relationship property litigation, but any litigation. If people go away, you know, feeling, oh gosh, I wish I'd got a bit more, what I say to people is, look, after the weekend you'll wake up and you've got this weight off your shoulders and you move on with your life.
Which is hugely important.
Yeah. So just to recap, do a chronology of events, which lists, you know, the significant events in your lives, well, with this person, when the relationship started, the arrival of children, if that's happened, and then acquisition of different assets and business, list all those down. Then accompanying that, a folder of documents, either soft or electronic copy, so those may be, you know, title deeds, share certificates, trust deeds, shareholder agreements, financial accounts, and then a separate document saying this is what I want, and then just remember to limit the interactions or to gather up your questions and give those to your lawyer in writing, because often if it's just done over the phone you'll probably forget half the time you know what your lawyer's told you. Or lawyers will often say, because they're cautious beasts, but can you put that in writing to me because I want to make sure that I've understood your question correctly and give you the right advice. So those are the tips on saving thousands of dollars engaging a divorce lawyer.
Well, those are invaluable tips. Absolutely. Thanks, Kalev.
Thank you. It was my pleasure to be able to share those.